Welcome to the GEO Virtual Symposium session on improving the policy relevance and the delivery of the next GEO Work Programme. As you see in the next slide, my name is Sara Venturini. I'm the climate coordinator at the GEO Secretariat, and I will be your moderator for this session. I just wanted to remind you of the meeting protocol in the next slide, especially inviting you to intervene with comments and questions in the chat, but also by raising your hand. You should know all of this by now, if you have attended the GEO Symposium this week. And in the next slide, you'll see the session overview. In this session, you will hear about the mapping of the GEO Work Programme activities that was led by a cross-working group task team. We have produced a report and have some interesting highlights to present and recommendations that are meant to support the effective development of the next GEO Work Programme 2023-2025. And what we expect from this session, well, first of all, we would like to get your endorsement of the findings and the recommendations. And secondly, we would like to hear from you if and how you are preparing to participate in the next GEO Work Programme. And for this purpose, there will be an interactive moment at the end of the session with intervention and a short poll. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Rui Kutani, DRR, Disaster Risk Reduction Coordinator. She will give us some background information on the mapping. So Rui, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Let me give you a quick introduction, as Sarah said, on this mapping effort. So the three working groups, climate change, DR, disaster risk reduction, and the capacity development, joined forces to design and undertake the mapping of the GEO Work Programme for almost 2 years in accordance with their terms of references. This mapping effort was intended to identify the engagement of the GEO Work Programme activities, users, and decision makers in 2 of the 4 GEO priorities: climate action, NDR, and 1 cross-cutting area, capacity development. As a result, we have identified needs and gaps or positive synergies in delivery workflows, as well as technical capacity and resources. The other 2 engagement and GEO engagement priorities are CHS, which stands for Sustainable Development and Resilient Cities and Human Settlement, did not have a dedicated working group when the mapping was conceived. So that's why they're not part of the GEO, the cross-working team. But urban resilience and SDGs have been implicitly covered in this mapping exercise as they're related to climate action DRR naturally. So all the relevant input has been collected. In parallel, the data working group has conducted a separate mapping exercise. The report is getting finalized, and we're excited to share the executive summary with you today. Please keep an eye on the chat for the link. The full report will be launched later this month on the GEO website. The report essentially summarizes the outcome of this mapping, and it gives guidance to the GEO community to advance the design and priorities of the next GEO Work Programme 2023 through 2025. The mapping covered all of the current GEO Work GEO Programme activities, which consists of 4 GEO flagships, 21 initiatives, 34 community activities, and 4 regional GEOs for a total of 64 activities. Sorry, next slide, please. So all of them responded to the survey and engaged with the cross-working group team between August last year and January this year. The mapping was essentially an online survey structured into 6 sections with 45 quantitative and qualitative questions. The mapping interface and dashboard that you can see on this image was designed by the cross-working group's task team with technical support from the United States Geological Survey, USGS, and Esri. The digital survey format by Survey 123 for ArcGIS allowed us to give a dedicated access link to each GEO Work Programme activity, so they could fill out answers and integrate and update data at different times and with multiple respondents. With this exercise, next slide, please. We learned some technical lessons. First of all, that the online format works really well. It's effective and inclusive. We had high engagement compared to previous mapping attempts in GEO. Secondly, the mapping gathered insightful data, and it's critical to establish a comprehensive baseline information on the GEO Work Programme activities and outlook for the future needs and gaps. There are also some technical challenges, though, especially in terms of inconsistencies of the answers due to the structure of the survey, as well as interface in this image, which required some additional analysis in Excel, for example. Based on this successful experience, it was agreed that the GEO Secretariat will integrate a dedicated module into the online form of the upcoming GEO Work Programme for the submission of the implementation plans by the GEO Work Programme activities 2023-2025. In this way, the collection information on climate, DR, capacity development matters will become automated going forward. So I'm done. So I pass the floor back to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rui. Really, this was a critical and enriching exercise that created awareness among the GEO Work Programme leads, the working groups, and the GEO Secretariat equally. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all the participants to the mapping and to the review of the report for their invaluable input and feedback and support during this period. And I want now to invite the working group co-chairs to present highlights and recommendations for each section. So in the next slide, I'll introduce the first speaker, Veronica Neumeier. She's a GEO consultant who has been supporting us in the analysis of the mapping results, and she has worked closely with USGS colleagues Amber Kremer and America Alvarez. Veronica will present highlights and recommendations on the general scope section. So Veronica, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have some general findings, and overall the 64 GWP activities cover actually a very wide range of relevant thematic domains, with many of the GWP activities contributing to multiple domains simultaneously. And considering the overall engagement across the domain clusters, there's actually a strong focus on land-related issues. So over half of all activities focus on land in comparison to water-related or cost-cutting issues. The three thematic domains most addressed are urban areas and cities, then croplands, and then followed by coastal zones, freshwater, and land. And the domains least addressed are the Arctic and cryosphere and small islands. It's interesting to note that very few of the GWP activities actually felt that they couldn't really identify themselves within any of the specific thematic domains. And actually there might be opportunity for the next survey to include also socioeconomic sectors such as energy or health. Next slide, please. Yes, so looking at geographical scales, the GWP activities operate and have impact across all geographical levels, and primarily on a regional and global scale with over 80% respectively. And more than 50% of all activities also have impact on sub-regional and national scale, while around 35% of the GWP activities also work locally. So I think we've received a lot of inputs, but when it comes to concrete engagement with stakeholders to implement projects or to actually facilitate actions, it's been challenging to identify the specific level or type of engagement and the related impact that the GWP activities have, and that was challenging to get more information around this. The countries most cited across the 30 GWP activities that responded on national engagement are shown in the image. And yes, we are aware that this is not representative of the breadth of GWP activities and the related work ongoing at the national level, because of the, half of the GWP activities not specifying more information. But I think it's also an opportunity for the next exercise to gather more insight on this particular point. Next slide, please. All GWP activities are engaged at least in one or all of the global policy drivers, at least in one of the global policy drivers, and GEO engagement priorities are sustainable development, climate action, and DRR. While almost all the GWP activities support sustainable development, almost 90%, there's a large overlap across the three global agendas. As it will appear more clearly later in the analysis, the areas of adaptation and loss and damage particularly are addressed by GWP activities under both climate action and DRR. Therefore, resilience building appears to be one cross-cutting element that supports climate adaptation, preparedness to weather-related disasters, and overall sustainable development. So this is shown in the indication. Yes, so moving to the recommendations coming out of the survey, the thematic domains such as Arctic cryosphere and small islands that are entailing cross-cutting EO activities between land and water are least addressed across the current GWP. And future GWP proposals should focus on these areas to develop new activities targeting support to SDGs and build on ongoing work around the Arctic Council mandate. And the second point is for future GWP proposals should also leverage the strength of existing water-related activities to bring relevant initiatives together and capitalize on knowledge and products that are existing. To the second point, more mature GWP activities, and ideally all GWP activities, should have concrete targets for on-the-ground implementation and collaboration with user communities for user uptake, particularly on national level with governments and also business sectors. And future GWP activities should be delivering EO data, knowledge, and products that directly support global policy agendas of climate action, DRR, and sustainable development, as well as the upcoming urban resilience and human settlements. This could be promoted through revision of selection criteria for the GWP activities to align more closely with the GEO engagement priorities, and obviously also in light of the post-2025 GEO strategic mission under development. Yes, thank you, and back to Sarah.
Thanks, Veronica. This is very insightful, and I'm now inviting Virginia Burkett, Chief Scientist at USGS and co-chair of the GEO Climate Change Working Group, to present the findings and recommendations on climate action. Virginia?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Yes, and also I want to thank the Climate Change Working Group, Subgroup 1, for the concept, the whole vision of this dashboard and the analysis, the members of that group. And ultimately, we hope to make the dashboard available to all, where you can get in and create your own graphics and analyses of the work program. So climate action is a top priority, of course, across the GEO Work Program. About 80% of the activities that report, and all of them did report, all 64. And while the activities are focused on climate change and climate action in general, the linkage between the work program and the policy instruments and the policy process appears to be indirect or lacking. Few activities that responded stated that they provide input to UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement or the IPCC processes. But there are collaborations, as indicated here, that we do have, are primarily driven by the data collection in the space agencies and the UN agencies like WMO. Next slide. So the GEO Work Program, if you dig deeper, you can see how it is aligned very strongly with the Paris Agreement sub work streams that are shown here. And here you've got the hits that we had in the survey from the 64 activities. So some of the activities would check off multiple areas of the Paris Agreement work streams. So that's why it doesn't total to 64, but you can see where the emphases are here. And this is a brand new slide trying to communicate the results that are all in the appendix to the report that you have access to now. So looking at these activities, the focus of the work program appears to be primarily on adaptation in the top, and climate science, and the climate science, of course, being the data and the tools to assess change and impacts and success of adaptation and so forth. So only a few of these activities directly, it shows relating to mitigation, but the impact of those activities, while they're down at the bottom, like the red plus mechanism, that's the GFOI, for example, primarily. And the impact of that is huge, as shown last year at the COP meeting. So it's hard to assess the actual delivery based on our survey results, but there are a significant number of activities that address the means of implementation. So the work program, please advance to the next slide if you would. Yeah. Okay, so the work program activities that are suitable for integrating into national adaptation processes are illustrated here. And the inventory shows that we've got a wide variety of inputs at different levels of maturity across the work program. GEO supplementary guidance, technical guidance for integrating EO into national adaptation plans, which is one of the objectives of our working group, is regarded as a good opportunity to channel the existing contributions of the work program that have expressed interest and are at that level of maturity. We receive positive feedback from many work program activities that they are willing to support national adaptation plan processes in different sectors like agriculture, food security, land, marine, coastal, all those listed there. Other activities stated that they could help multiple sectors or topics and help with on-the-ground implementation through local and regional partners. These activities can build on ongoing GeoGlam work, for example, to develop supplementary technical guidance on EO in the agriculture sector that will help least developed countries and other developing countries strengthen their adaptation, loss, and damage response. For instance, on the analysis of national investment for risk assessment and other factors within the 2018 NAP for Colombia, which was presented at AmeriGeo Week last year, there is potential for application of EO-based climate services such as GeoGlows to be mainstreamed into national adaptation planning. Next slide. So we've got more than 4 recommendations in the report, but we've highlighted several here. One is the first one is that existing and future work program activities should aim at identifying and establishing collaboration with the relevant UNFCCC and IPCC national focal points, especially through national and local GEO Work Program activity partners. Number 2, the GEO Work Program can build on its strength in the area of resilience building, that adaptation theme that runs across the work program, and connect these with other aspects of climate action, with disaster risk reduction, and the sustainable development agendas. Future work program activities should develop or improve tools, services, and methodologies that contribute to adaptation and loss and damage, notably including knowledge products that target support for developing countries' national adaptation plans, while continuing to provide that core foundation for climate science assessments, or climate assessments and climate science in general. Future GEO Work Program activities can focus on climate finance and in implementing the Paris Agreement and specifically in supporting business and financial institutions in running climate risk assessments, as well as supporting least developed countries and small island states in improving the rationale for their project proposals for climate finance in the adaptation and mitigation arena. And that came out strong during our second climate workshop that GEO hosted last year. And finally, existing and future work program activities should seek opportunities for collaboration with other GEO Work Program activities, a lot of potential for leveraging, and also with the regional GEOs and the climate change working group in general at these nexus areas where they can develop a more integrated approach to address climate change impacts across key sectors, such as climate health cities, climate infrastructure, energy, climate ocean, biodiversity. Those are the nexus areas that we're talking about. So I'll turn it back to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Virginia, for the overview on the climate section. Obviously, there's so many more data points and specific information in the report that you will be able to see shortly. But these are the highlights, and I'm now inviting David Borges, scientist at NASA Langley Center, and co-chair of the GEO Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, to present the findings and recommendation for DRR.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Of course, after successful testing, my camera will not turn on, so apologies, but I'll move right ahead. I similarly want to extend my thanks specifically to our disaster risk reduction community across GEO for their time and efforts in contributing to this section of the survey. I'm happy to report that broadly there's strong alignment with and support for Sendai framework across the current work program. The figure on our left highlights the core elements of Sendai framework and work program activity alignment as captured by this mapping effort. Sendai framework itself consists of 4 priorities for action, 7 global targets, and 38 specific indicators underneath the various targets. 37 work program activities stated that their work directly aligns with or supports Sendai framework. Because of survey question structures, 42 activities self-identified as aligning with specific Sendai framework priorities, and by far with 34 activities, the first Sendai priority, which is understanding disaster risk, was the most popular. 33 activities suggested alignment with the global targets. Target 5 also was the most popular, which addresses increasing availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk reduction information assessments. And at the most detailed and very much the most difficult level from a reporting perspective, 24 work program activities claim to support specific indicators, with 10 activities selecting indicator G5 in particular, which is the number of countries that have accessible, understandable, usable, and relevant disaster risk information. We can see some critical gaps here, and the most obvious one being target E in the right side chart. Sendai framework target E addresses the creation of national disaster risk reduction strategies. And from a GEO perspective specifically, and a policy perspective in general, we are very interested in supporting this target through efforts to increase the number of national disaster risk reduction strategies that address and provide guidance regarding the value and utility of Earth observations. Our disaster risk reduction working group has actually been working on this topic for some time very closely with our partners in Jamaica. And I encourage all here to go back when you have time and review our systemic risk in Jamaica session that was held yesterday during the symposium to learn more. Next slide, please. This next chart crosswalks common sustainable development goal SDGs and Sendai framework indicators. And if you focus on the right side of the column, you will see that it details the number of work program activities aligned with or contributing to these common SDG and Sendai indicators. Notably, none of the work program activities directly support the 2 global indicators on DRR strategies at the national or local level. This result is consistent with the results in the previous slide. Even though 44 work program activities state that they contribute to both DRR, Sendai framework, and sustainable development goals, only 15 activities are working on common indicators as identified here. Next slide, please. When work program activity leads were asked whether they work with disaster risk reduction practitioners in any country they're actively collaborating with, 27 of those activities confirmed that they work with national DRR practitioners, institutions, or agencies, but 37 activities either responded negatively or did not provide any answers. So the results reflected here do highlight that by the numbers, we have quite limited engagement with relevant national agencies. And more specifically, only 2 activities confirmed actual working relationships with Sendai Framework national focal points who serve, who have the responsibility for reporting on Sendai Framework at the country level. Next slide, please. Here we can see the breakdown of the work program by individual thematic areas, with the top 3 thematic areas addressing flood, drought, and wildfire. And I note that these results are actually very closely aligned with a recent UNDRR report titled The Human Cost of Disasters, which provided an historical analysis of human impacts of disasters over the past 20 years. And I think this affirms that the work program is focused on the right thematic areas. I also know that the work program can build on our strengths in the areas of climate-related hazards, to include flood, drought, and wildfire. And we encourage the community to contribute to the next work program cycle with activities that address systemic risk and multiplier effects of multi-hazards. As an example, earthquakes and resulting tsunamis, which are quite commonplace among small island developing states as well as least developed countries. And that brings us, I think, to our final disaster slide with our recommendations. The first one being existing and future work program activities should identify in their new implementation plans and to work with at least one specific national stakeholder, whether that be a Sendai National Focal Point Agency or civil protection agency. In terms of countries, the activities should ideally work with small island developing states or least developed countries, as well as low and middle income countries, due to high vulnerability to repeated loss and damage. Types of national disaster risk reduction users they can consider to include the more obvious civil protection and disaster management agencies are, for example, national hydromet agencies or agricultural ministries. Second priority recommendation here is existing and future work program activities should develop or improve tools, services, and methodologies that contribute to specific Sendai Framework targets and indicators. As an example, early warning, target G, and as well as very specifically Sendai Framework and SDG common indicators. In doing so, it's essential for all implementation plan proposals to clearly define and be ready to explain what services and product offerings they have or are developing. Then the activities should examine which Sendai Framework global targets and indicators they can support with their offerings, especially the common indicators between Sendai and SDGs. And I do know, our GEO Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group is more than willing to work on this particular topic with work program activities, as well as identify and help develop relationships with these target agencies, whether they be national Sendai focal points or others. Finally, in number 3, existing and future work program activities should seek opportunities for collaboration with other work program activities and regional GEOs and our DRR working group in nexus areas where they can develop an integrated approach to address the increasing nature of systemic disaster risk, where events overlap and interplay with multiple risk drivers. And I do want to emphasize that these priority recommendations that we're running through right now themselves, we've tried to be very thoughtful in crafting them with this nexus focus in mind, remembering one of Virginia's previous climate recommendations related to adaptation, loss, and damage, which have clear disaster risk reduction ties. The activities should join forces to simultaneously address multi-hazards such as, again, earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, landslides, and to the extent possible, taking into account COVID-19 pandemic implications. Whatever combination of hazards they address, it is also critical to take into consideration exposure data, for example, in terms of critical infrastructures and human movements. In reporting this, I'll just close very briefly in a phrase that I've heard before, that you can't manage what you can't measure. And at the country level, it is commonplace for countries to not be able to report on all of the targets and indicators for Sendai framework. It's very commonplace. So this is a clear need and a clear gap. And I'm really excited as we move into the next GEO Work Programme to try and get a bit more specific and move from aligning with Sendai framework priorities to really putting more time and effort into working directly with country end users to leverage Earth observation solutions to improve Sendai framework target monitoring. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave. And I can only agree that from the findings of the DRR and climate sections, we hear where the strengths of the GEO Work Programme lie around resilience building, adaptation, addressing loss and damage, and early warning. And I'm now inviting Nancy Serby, Capacity Building Program Manager at NASA and co-chair of the GEO Capacity Development Working Group, to present the findings and recommendation on capacity development. Nancy?
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to say thanks to our small team that worked really hard with Sarah and Dave and all of the folks on this. That would be Krista Straub from USGS, who's part of USGEO, Monica Miguel-Alago from IARSC, and Allison Craddock, my co-chair. So what we found is that, no surprise, and we've heard it throughout this week, that capacity development is cross-cutting, and it's key to enabling the actual use of all of our products. So that would be EO and climate, DRR, and across all GEO Work Programme activities. And so this graph on the left shows the that 29 or 45% of the GEO Work Programme activities collaborate with each other on capacity development. And the community activities, actually 13 or 20% of them are engaged in capacity development. And finally, you can see that the collaboration across all three areas, the climate, DRR, and capacity development, is across 15% of the elements. We did have some GEO Work Programme activities that said they didn't have any collaboration in place or link at all. So it's interesting to think about as we are planning our next work plan, how we might strengthen those collaborations. In the graph on the right, you can see the topology of capacity development activities currently carried out by our work program. And you can see that at the very top of that bar graph is dissemination of new scientific tools and co-design of EO products. And then second, right behind it, is co-design of Earth observation products and tools. So this is a really not surprising result in my mind, but useful result to see how the different works are currently using to disseminate their work. And we can see that we have some methods that are used less frequently. That would be training, reports, and webinars. So we can consider that future planning. Next slide, please. We also asked who our work activities target for users. And you can see that research and academic institutions are most common target users for capacity development resources across the work program. Federal and central government is right up there as well. And you can see that that's near the top of the graph. And if you look to the bottom of the graph, you can see that non-governmental organizations, private sector, consortia, tribal and indigenous organizations are not yet the primary target for our work. And so if you think about that, I think GEO's members are government, and we have a lot of associates and participating organizations. And so our focus on public sector makes sense from a point of view of the membership. Also, I think the academic makes sense as well from the point of view of if we're working to build youth and the next generation, being able to enable them to use our geospatial information is an important part of our workforce development for all of us. Next slide, please. So this graph shows what was recommended as EO capacity development delivery approaches from our community. And interestingly, you can see if you start at the upper left there at 4.03, that use cases are considered the most effective method of delivering capacity development, and then followed by online training and application-specific decision, document-specific work and co-development. And so the interesting thing about this is, I think we heard this earlier in the week as well, that having examples for others to follow, for example, even if we have the code out on GitHub and all the information at Knowledge Hub, use cases really do help our users see how they can apply our information, which is really, I think, encourage us to think about this further and how we might develop these kinds of resources more holistically. Next slide. So if you look at our recommendations, there are 3 major recommendations. As Sarah mentioned, the report has rich information. I hope you have the chance to dive through it and see if you want to pull out other recommendations that you think are worthwhile for your activity. So one concept that came across from our survey, as well as in additional conversations, both with the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group, as well as with our Geo Indigenous Alliance, is that capacity sharing, rather than building or developing, can be heard more inclusively and more culturally sensitively as a way to work together. That's kind of the co-development, co-led work, and sharing our knowledge from both the users as well as from the developers of tools. And one of the part of that recommendation is for us to support side events and other initiatives for sharing the current resources and good practices, as well as to foster diverse and inclusive engagement with underrepresented user groups, such as tribal and indigenous communities, and many others that I'm sure we're not yet reaching, as we saw on that graph of our target users. If you think about the capacity development strategies and plans, we really need to tailor tools and resources to current target users and consider strategies for including them, and also think about how we are disseminating and delivering our information. I do encourage you to go look at the report. We didn't have enough time to dive through that, to think about specifically which user are you targeting and how are you reaching them, and what is your method of dissemination for that target user group, as well as what's the best way to deliver that information. As we know, for example, internet access is still not available throughout the world, and so how are we reaching those groups, for example? The third recommendation is to share and reuse existing resources. We learned that, in fact, our GEO Work program is doing a lot of capacity development, which is fantastic, or capacity sharing, and yet finding those resources isn't so easy right now. So we should make available an inventory of those resources so that we make them more discoverable. There are ways to do that from an interoperability perspective. And potentially this could be a function of the Geo Knowledge Hub in the future, so that these resources are available to be modified or repurposed, and also serve as an example of good practices. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I think this was also another very insightful section with lots more to read in the full report. I remind those who maybe joined later that we have an executive summary with the recommendations available that was shared in the chat. But the full report will be launched very soon, in the next couple of weeks, and will be available to download from the GEO website. And we'll have more events, I'm sure, to go through the findings and further work to implement the recommendations. And of course, the working groups are key to that, but most of the responsibilities sometimes and onus lies with the GEO Work Programme activities and the GEO Secretariat to support them. And so we're doing really well with time. We have now an opportunity to interact with the participants of this session. We have, in the next slide, we have prepared a little poll that we can open right now. And the poll is aimed at endorsing and prioritizing some of the recommendations, and to also let you ideally express your interest in participating in the next GEO Work Programme Let us know what is it that you're envisaging, and maybe if you are already addressing some of the recommended actions that we have prioritized based on the mapping results. And while the poll is going, I would like to open the floor for comments and questions. I've seen that there are already several comments in the chat, and I recommend to also the speakers to respond in writing, but also we can have some participants raise their hand and intervene directly, speak up if you wish to. Hopefully this will be words of endorsement, but criticism and other types of comments are also welcome. The report is still draft, it's the last days, but we are still, we still have the chance to review it and tweak it in case. So I'm opening the floor for comments, also from the working group co-chairs if they wish to.
Yeah, Virginia, I could maybe go first, noting Mary Beth Neely heard spot on observation and comments in the chat regarding difficulty on collaboration on DRR activities. Yeah, we noted this from multiple feedback sources throughout this process. We do think that there's a it's very easy, I suppose, to kind of for one to raise their hand and say yes, I align with UNDRR's Sendai framework, but it is along with other global policy frameworks, it's very complex. It's not very straightforward, and so that's one thing that we're considering right now. The GEO-DRR working group is considering right now, anyways. Maybe organizing something along the lines of educational sessions over the next year, aimed inwardly at the GEO community to raise the level of awareness and education about Sendai framework itself. And secondly, and finally, on your point of collaboration, and I see that Rui replied in writing as well, but not mentioned today, we are working directly with UNDRR as well on the development of an Earth observations risk toolkit, which we very much hope, following a soft launch at Global Platform in Bali in just I think 20 or so days, it will evolve over time and serve as a place to collaborate where success stories and use cases can be shared broadly and benefit all. Thank you.
Yeah, just to sort of supplement what Dave said. Yeah, I mean, Mary, I 100% agree. It's easy to say, but really, really hard to do. Even though I mentioned in my chat that as a GEO Secretariat member, DR coordinator, I really need to heavily rely on the experts in DR working groups such as Dave and others. And it's frankly speaking, we've been able to start with this specific collaboration with Jamaica because of really Dave's effort, in connecting different networks. There's another group called the UNGGIM that Dave is involved, and we got to know the disaster risk reduction agency senior official, as well as the GIS sort of expert, like the management person. Both of them happen to be working together. It's a golden couple for us, and so we've started to leverage this great network that Dave was able to tap in, and now we are involving the specific GEO work programs with the use cases to show, such as GeoGlows. And human plan initiatives, which may not have country level sort of examples, use cases, but they have great, like data and that they can show and put them together and start conversations. And really, like with that specific sort of users getting already on board and getting very interested, we can finally really start discussing and getting involved. So it's a really hard process and takes time, lots of effort, but we're trying.
Yes, if I may chime in here, indeed we observe this lack of examples and experiences of national level cooperation also on the climate action side. And there's other recommendations in the report that speak to facilitating the connection between the GEO Work Programme activities and GEO focal points in the countries in which they are active. And this would in turn hopefully facilitate the sharing of collaboration experiences. And we have some good models in GEO, like Australia, Colombia, and the UK, who prepared their own country profiles that cover GEO Work Programme activities that operate in those countries at the national and local level. And that's extremely helpful for us, GEO Secretariat coordinators, and as we can identify the relevant activities and help them link to the policy process much better. And obviously, there's a whole question regarding the participation of developing country members from underrepresented regions in GEO governing bodies, notably the program board. And I know that efforts are underway, but there's more to do and more encouragement to be made for those countries. There are some specific questions in the chat, as I can see, on the thematic focus on the Arctic. If Mark Urban wants to speak up, maybe it's easier for everybody to reply and intervene on this question. Mark?
No, I was just putting this.
Your mic is a bit low. Can you?
Yeah, hear you.
Can you put your mic closer to the mouth, or?
Do you hear me?
Still very low.
Wait, no, maybe.
Turn up the volume. In the meantime, the poll is ongoing. I got 46 out of 114 participants, so please do reply. I'll wait a little bit. We have already some interesting answers.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Oh, okay, good. Good to hear. No, this was, I was putting just a kind of, let's say, candid question. I'm sure many people have it in mind, and it has been put in the figures that even that this thematic about Arctic and cryosphere is very, let's say, it's not the top priority at this moment, but it seems that maybe it's as it is. I mean, the decisions are being taken by stakeholders that take into consideration what their, let's say, constituency is worried about. So it's quite logical that this kind of thematic have to be taken up at a more global level, I suppose. And so that's what I tried to put on the table as just a question for consideration.
Thanks, Mark. I know that the topic of Arctic and cryosphere is already been addressed partially in the GEO Work Programme, and my colleague Doug Kripe is specifically following cryosphere and water issues. So perhaps there's maybe Doug could intervene, but there's.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Just to quickly update everyone. I participated in the Arctic Observing Summit that was held about a month ago in Norway, and there was a lot of good discussion, I think, on where SEAN wants to go with the roads process in building up at the Arctic Observing Network. And there's a real interest in engaging with GEO in a lot of areas, capacity development, and also indigenous knowledge, how we share that knowledge in a mutually respectful way. And as Miko Stralendorf has noted in the chat window as well, there's the Arctic, there's a European project called Arctic Passion, which is kind of playing an important role in bringing together the Arctic observing system and also providing applications for societal benefits. So there are things happening, and I think that it will become more evident as we have an update of the implementation plan for the Arctic in the update of the work program.
Thanks, Doug.
If I may, I was just pointing also to the fact that Antarctica should also be included in both ways. It's both poles are equally important in terms of impact that of what's happening there is having on climate change and such things, I suppose. Yeah.
Indeed, and another focal area of the recommendation is small island developing states that are underrepresented and suffering the most impacts of climate change and disasters. So we really encourage future GEO Work Programme activities to address these priority themes and topics in new initiatives and build on the successful initiatives. Of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel or anything, but there's more to do for these two particular areas. Oh, Angelica, hello, please. And then Françoise.
Yes, good morning. I thank you to all the presenters and thank you to all the leaders of the working groups, because this is extremely important for the people like me who are leading things in the regional and also in thematic. And I want to address two things. In the disaster risk reduction, it says that nearly 60% of the working plan activities have no or limited connection with users, especially at the national level. And so that to me says, highlights the importance of something that we have been actually pushing for at least 2 or 3 years, and is the importance of the national GEOs. And I think that is very, very important to realize that unless you have that structure in place, this type of results are not going to be, we will be spinning the wheels basically. So, and this is a recommendation that I will have for all the leaders of the other regionals. We need to work on building the national GEOs. In AmeriGeo, we don't have a recipe. So I think that in that regard, we would like to share our lessons learned, what has worked for us and what is not working for us, but also learn from the other regionals in that regard. And at that moment, then we will have more engagement in that. The second point that I want to make is capacity development. And so now I'm using my GeoGlows hat. The thematic initiatives are the ones who have the knowledge of what is being done, what are the issues. And so I think that the GeoGlobal should be providing a little bit more support to the flagships and initiatives who can drive better that capacity development, rather than having a whole umbrella of things, of courses. So from the thematic perspective, we can actually focus on providing the capacity on the specific tools that the thematic initiatives or flagships are developing. Is just something that it comes, from my experience. That has been my experience from the GeoGlows perspective. So thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Angelica.
I'd like to respond to that, Sarah.
Sure, and then Francoise. Okay.
Okay, Angelica, as a great point, and looking at the results of this cross-work program analysis in these three areas, strengthening the national geos would help make those policy connections more. They would be more natural, more, you wouldn't have to reach out cold to your UNFCCC focal point. If you had the national geo, they'd be coming to you. Okay, so that's a wonderful point. And it's not one of our recommendations because we looked at the existing work program, and that's kind of a very high level recommendation that we need to capture. I just think it's a beautiful point. And looking at the experience with the AmeriGeo and the countries helping one another stand up their own national geos, it's a great example. Just deeply appreciate that comment. It's kind of a overarching comment we need to capture. Thanks.
Indeed. Thanks, Virginia. And Francoise?
This is Jay, and Francoise is here. I was going to comment on Nancy's presentation, but then Angelica raised a core of issues that were similar. And so let me reinforce a couple of things. There could be a very strong recommendation that methods developed in the individual programs and across GEO be documented and available. And Angelica suggested that as a way to get national programs to understand the methodologies and methods to be used to build their own. So there should be a library, and the library can reside within the GEO information system, or you can use existing libraries such as the Ocean Best Practices System or the Arctic Practices System. So if I may suggest that we, for capacity sharing, for the processes, et cetera, that we develop methodologies that can be accepted and understood.
Thank you. And I think our recommendation specifically suggested to use the existing channels in GEO, including the GEO Knowledge Hubs, because there is still a space to tweak it. So I will hear from Emily first, and then Nancy and others if you want to intervene.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So building on some things Angelica said, is we have found as a thematic initiative that when you have a good product and you're trying to build capacity in the regions, that working with a regional GEO is really helpful because they know the organizations that are stable, which are not stable, who has good funding, who has good resources and things of that sort. I think one thing that is a challenge is that there is a lot of interest in doing that and building collaborations across the GEO initiatives and regional GEOs and GEO flagships, but a lot of people are just totally taxed with their time. So when you try to propose a collaboration, they say, that sounds fantastic, but we can hardly keep up with what we're currently doing. So I'm not sure how the GEO sector can address that, but that's an ongoing challenge that we all have in terms of collaborating across the work program.
Indeed. Nancy, do you want to respond?
Oh, Sarah, I wanted to also comment on this
Okay.
point.
Let's have Nancy and John, or do you want to respond immediately to Emily? Rui?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to directly respond to Emily because I used to be in the government side, the national GEO side. And I mean, it could be cultural, but I mean, as you said, we can hardly, hardly keep up with like all the jobs that we're supposed to be doing, and we don't necessarily have direct connections with like center national focal points, like climate focal points and all that stuff. So as a GEO secretariat, me and Sarah have been, through this process, I've been feeling how important it is for us as a GEO secretariat staff to make connections through our POs, like such as UNDR and UNCCC, and sort of go towards, from both ways. We encourage and ask for national GEOs to support, but at the same time, we might not be able to get all the connections needed. If it works, great, but if not, that's why Sarah and I try to work with our POs, like through attending the relevant conferences, and try to make our connections, and also rely on our working group experts.
Indeed, and essentially we need those connections to make the GEO Work Programme activities be relevant for the policy areas that they support. And Nancy, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think all the way back to Angelica's comment and then through about the capacity sharing best approach moving forward. I think that we heard what we heard, and I think there is capacity sharing going on throughout the GEO Work Programme. The question is how to make it more discoverable and interoperable, some of our principles that we have at the data side, but on the capacity building resources side. And I agree with Angelica that the experts in water sustainability are in GeoGlows, and they should be building the skills to do that. And the value of the capacity development working group is really to help bring the good practices so that everyone knows about them and we learn from each other in that regard. And then I think that if GeoSec, whether it's the Knowledge Hub or whatever channel platform, the website, the dissemination method that's best for people to find those resources, I definitely don't think that the capacity development level folks should be reproducing, and we certainly don't have the resources to lead those kinds of capacity development efforts. So I think it is a collaboration. And I also wanted to just echo that the region to nation to subnational work is part of the regional GEOs. And I do think that that's key. And Columbia GEO being a great example of the journey they've taken towards really having a robust national GEO that then can really help work with their country, but then work with others to really harness the value of Earth observations for their particular needs. So thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Indeed, the relevance of regional GEOs is already reflected in their sort of special status in the work program, but more could be done to promote their coordination role. And I have John Firth for an intervention. Hi, John.
Hi. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for organising this and to the pretty amazing presentation so far and the discussion. I mean, I absolutely endorse all the comments that I've heard so far. Just looking at the recommendations, I completely support every one of those recommendations, but I do feel that there's a challenge for GEO going forward in terms of its work program, in terms of actually engaging with users who make decisions. And I'm really pleased, for example, in the recommendation on 2, the reference to business sectors has been included. I think it was Nancy earlier on mentioned about the public sector being the stronger user group, and that's true, and with the research group. But if we want to truly gain the value of Earth observation and build adaptable, resilient communities that take into account justice and equity, then we've actually got to engage with those who hold the purse strings and make investment decisions and provide most of the goods and services on which we all depend. So that really does mean, I feel, that we have to really think hard about how do we actually engage with the business sector, the wider business sector. And I don't just mean corporates, I mean all elements of the business sector. And it's notable to me that when I talk to the business and financial services world, they're actually, by and large, extremely ignorant about the wealth of data and analysis that's available through the Earth observation community. So I think there was a call earlier on, I think it was Virginia, talked about strengthening national GEOs. Yes, but I'd like to see them strengthened also in a way in which they start to engage with the business and investment communities in their own countries and actually get them beginning to realize there's a wealth of information and knowledge in which we can improve decision making. So for me, that's a big priority going forward.
Thanks, John. And coming from you, for sure, it's very insightful comments, and there is a window of opportunity here with the response to the midterm review and the post-2025 GEO strategic mission being developed to push on the role of the GEO community to support financial decisions with Earth observations, to monitor risk on assets and portfolio of investments for businesses and financial institutions. So we really are keen to continue this conversation. This started last year when during the GEO climate policy and finance workshop, we sort of endorsed the need to have this work stream, but then actual activities and and collaboration are being developed. So that's why future work program activities are strongly encouraged to address this particular topic, and with tools and ideas to work with the private sector specifically. So thanks again, John, for all you said.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think from my company's perspective, Willis Towers Watson, we're more than happy to play a role in trying to encourage and develop that engagement. We feel we have some contacts and door openers we can use, both with our relationship with national governments on national adaptation planning, etc., and climate finance, but also with the much wider corporate and business and financial service community. So we see we have a potential role to play here, which we're not shirking. We'll be there.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, if I may respond to John, and he's got the wealth of experience he brings to the table here. Somehow in the GEO Work Program in the future, either in the post-2025 or in this updates and new activities can be proposed, rather than having all that scattered and trying to connect. Maybe, a specific activity could be initiated on along the lines that John is talking about. Anyways, just something to think about, because right now we're not set up other than to try to connect what is incoming and proposed, and a thumbs up from John. So would welcome, I think, on behalf of the Climate Change Working Group, for sure, an initiative or some idea that would help pull it together more naturally. Thanks.
Thanks, Virginia. Yeah, that's encouraging. I see some more comments in the chat, some conversation going on. There is one point, last comment by Roger, asking to have GEO Secretariat designated point of contact associated with each activity in the GEO Work Program. As you can imagine, this is not really feasible because of the limited human resources and time we have, but we have in coordination coordinators, GEO engagement priority coordinators, who are trying to coordinate with activities based on their priority policy driver, right? So that's why we really encourage the future and current GEO Work Program activities to identify their policy arena and their main priorities, so that we can help them. So for those activities that relate to climate, that I will be the focal point for the activities related to disaster risk reduction is RUI, and for sustainable development, we have Laurent Durieux, and we have now a new capacity development coordinator also in the GEO Secretariat since this week. So our team is small, but it's growing, and yeah, and we are here to help, but you also need to make an effort to help us identify your needs and priorities. So that's my plea. And in the meantime, I have 54 answers from the poll, which I would like to close now. Can I just click on end poll? Can we see the results?
You need to share the result.
Me or?
Yeah, if you have the.
I click share results.
Yeah.
We can see it.
You can, okay. Okay, so let's go through them quickly. Yeah, I see there is a general agreement with the proposed recommendations for the next GEO Work Programme. Generally okay, no disagreement, which is good. So I think we can proceed on this basis. And in terms of the most relevant recommendations, I see that probably we have two that stand out. Yes, this one is I was talking about just now. Number 3, align the selection criteria of GEO Work Programme activities with global policy agenda, so that the GEO Work Programme leads know the general direction that they're going, and this will help us support the connection with the relevant policy context or users. And the other one that stands out a bit is number 5, that future activities should try and focus Earth observation tools and services for adaptation and loss and damage, including national adaptation plan support. So that's very good. It's good to hear. There's a lot of engagement. Oh, but there was a stronger one about capacity sharing. I think there's a lot of agreement around the need to revisit the concept of capacity development or capacity building, which is a very Western kind of approach to a more culturally sensitive capacity sharing and concept and practices. So this is very good. And also the need to tailor capacity development resources to target current users, and without forgetting the least addressed groups, and improve dissemination and delivery with strategies for each work program activity, ideally. Then the next question was about the interest in submitting a proposal for the next GEO Work Programme. It's basically half-half. There's no clear, there are 20 respondents who said yes, they are submitting a proposal for the next GEO Work Programme. So we can expect around the same number or so of proposal. I know that many have already been submitted, and through the new online system, hopefully we'll have a smoother process. The next question was on whether the upcoming GEO Work Programme activity would address the global policy agendas, and most of them, I guess, very much in line with the findings of the mapping report, say that they'll mainly address sustainable development. Secondly, climate. Thirdly, disaster risk reduction, and then resilient cities and human settlements. So this is in line with our findings, good. But there are some too who say that they're not addressing these policy agendas. So I'm curious to hear whether these are because some policy agendas that we are missing in this list are being addressed, or whether they are really not interested in following the policy route. So maybe those who replied could hopefully speak up. The next question was about the inclusion of capacity development elements in the upcoming work program activities. And I see very happily that almost all say yes. There are 4 who say no. And those 4, I would also be interested to hear why and what's missing, and what perhaps the capacity development coordinator and capacity development working group could do to help. And finally, whether the upcoming activity would address one of the currently least represented target user groups in the upcoming activity. So most of the answers say that we'll address nonprofits, I guess also including NGOs, but significantly 10 will address the private sector, and also 10 for tribal indigenous communities, which is good. But again, some are really not focusing on least represented target groups. So yeah, thank you for this feedback. It's helpful, and we can analyze the results further. I think these broadly are, as I said, in alignment with our findings. So that's encouraging for us for our analysis, which, like I said in the beginning, went over almost 2 years. I'm from the design and from when it was originally conceived to the analysis. It's been almost 2 years journey, but yeah, we're nearly there, and after this there will be the implementation phase. So I'm keen to continue working with all of you. I see there's Madia on the screen for some reason. Madia, did you want to perhaps speak up as a new member of our GEO Secretariat?
Everyone, that was accidental, but somehow my camera is not working. I did want to say hi. I started this week as a Chief Work Program Coordinator, and I look forward to interacting with most of you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Madia. Angelica?
Yeah, I just want to say one final thought, and this is not directed to the GEO Secretariat, but actually to the people who sitting in this conversation who are from all the regions in the world. GEO is not the GEO Secretariat. GEO is not the leaders of the initiative. You need to get involved, because I have been reading the comments, and the comments is basically GEO has to do this or that. You need to get involved, and you need to put forward the interests of your community. That's the only way that we are really going to make things happen, because the GEO community, or the GEO leaders of the initiatives and so forth, and the Secretariat are only here to help the users. So my plea to you and to all the users that are here is get involved, get engaged into all the activities. Maybe you have an amazing idea, something different that we have not done, and that it will be the perfect response for your community. So please get involved. We will help, but it has to come from the user community, from the people, rather than the leaders. That's my final thought.
That's very well said, Angelica. Thanks for your support and understanding. I see that Pilar has her hand up as well. Please.
Yes, hello everybody. Adding to what Angelica said, I think it's very, very important that we include the youth. We have seen in many places that there is no transition in generation, so we lose what we have learned. And it's very important to support in the ED activities this. I want to see more young people, and maybe some of us that work at university, we have to make an effort to do some kind of recruitment for these groups. I think that they are somehow underrepresented when we look at the experience of everybody talking in our meeting. It's over 7 to 10 years, and so we need younger people. And these young people are going to be sometime policymakers, so they will help us. Thanks.
Thanks, Pilar. It's very wise. And in our community and through the GEO Secretariat, we're already making effort to promote youth engagement in GEO. And we have, well, Stephen Ramage and Florian Franciscakis, who are particularly focusing on this also during the GEO week. So hopefully we'll see more of more young people in our GEO community going forward. I think yeah, some of the responses are popping up in the chat by some colleagues, so I guess we don't have to respond orally, but I still invite my colleagues and others for final comments. We have a few more minutes, and then we'll leave the floor to the closing session. So Rui, please.
Hi, I wanted to also make one more point, which Francois mentioned, the need to store the methodologies and all that in the appropriate GEO space online, which Sarah quickly mentioned. We should take leverage of the existing resources such as Knowledge Hub. I wanted to highlight and also, if possible, invite my colleague Paola, if she's still there. I saw her online, but I just wanted to give one example of what we've started to do. So as we mentioned, we're working on the GeoSec, and the DR working group has been working with the UNDR and Esri on the EO Risk Toolkit, where we try to make our GEO offerings in really easier non-technical terms for the users, like DR users. And so recently we linked up with the GEO Knowledge Hub team, Paula, and came up with like very short summary of one of the methodologies which came out of the GEO Work Programme. And this GEO Work Programme actually has the knowledge packages linked to the methodologies in the GEO Knowledge Hub. So we are trying to think that we're trying to hope that the DR users who are very well connected to UNDR and like national governments, just step into our our platform like EO Risk Toolkit and get the short summary of the methodologies that we're creating, and get interested and want to learn more about it. And then the EO Risk Toolkit has a links to GEO Knowledge Hub, so they go into more in-depth, like all the nitty-gritty, like all the scientific reports, the actual codes and everything in the Knowledge Hub. Paula, do you want to add anything?
Thank you very much, Rui. Indeed, the GEO Knowledge Hub is operational, and it is being conceived to be the place for GEO to host just more than data, but methodologies and solutions. And of course, we're extremely happy to have been starting working with Rui on these initial steps of hosting the EO for disaster risk reduction toolkit, one of the solutions.
Thanks, Paula. The GEO Knowledge Hub was really identified as one of the opportunities to share existing resources. So we look forward to engaging with the data working group and the Knowledge Hub team for this going forward. I think we can wrap up this session now. Thanks so much, everybody, for the invaluable comments and contribution again. And we'll be in touch with the final report. You will see it pop up in the GEO website. We'll send communication around it. And I would like to give us a virtual round of applause, because it was honestly a huge task that this cross working group task team addressed for the last, like I said, almost 2 years, but we made it and we're happy with the results, and we are super excited that these recommendations and findings have been endorsed today by you, who are the beneficiaries and of this analysis, and hopefully you can make good use of it in the next GEO Work Programme. So thank you again. This leaves us with a few minutes to catch our breath before the closing session. Thank you.